We all study and love life in the deep sea, but have you ever thought it would be just a little monotonous to live there? Like, it's amazing, don't get me wrong, but slow, like really slow. Sure, it's exciting for us to pop in, we fly around with our subs, our ROVs, we turn on all the lights, illuminate a world never before seen. Then we dash back out, back to shore, spend the rest of the year turning our 2 week deep sea vacation into data that says something about their natural world, all while juggling work, family, traffic, yoga, mortgages, and lengthy names of Starbucks coffees. Our world is fast. We do things fast. The deep sea does things slow. During my PhD, almost a lifetime ago, I was thrilled when on those early expeditions we came across a truly massive Gorgonian coral. It's a common story, most of us have experienced it. You're watching the monitor. Mud, mud, gravel, mud, boulder, life attracting life. So many animals. The best day of my life. For the coral? Average day. No different than the last 10,000 days. Here's one of those corals in 2008 with a growth rate of about 1 centimeter per year. Here's a low budget computer simulation of what it probably looks like today, 12 years later. Amazingly, I can go backwards in time too. Same coral, 100 years ago. These rough-eye rockfish, snuggled up in the branches of the coral, can live to be over 200 years old. So there's a good chance that this rockfish was sitting here in 1920. That's 4 years before my grandmother was born. I'm reminding you of the innate difference in the world we live in and the one we study, because this general disconnect in the natural cadence between the two is causing some long-lasting negative results in the deep ocean. My name is Dr. Charisse Dupree, and my job at Fisheries and Oceans Canada is to walk the line between these two worlds, to study and protect the deep sea ecosystems. In this presentation, I'm going to tell you 3 stories about our region's underwater mountains and the rapidly changing ocean conditions they are experiencing. Along the way, you'll learn how hard it is already to be a deep sea animal in an ocean world changing at the will and pace of humans. For the last 3 summers, the Deep Sea Ecology Program and partners have explored the region's dense and diverse network of seamats. Our goals were closely tied to national and international commitments to the Aichi biodiversity targets. We were there to catalog life on and around seamats. Our initial findings included tripling the amount of known seamats, classifying them by ecology, finding new dense cold water coral and sponge habitats, identifying and collecting many species new to science, spotting tropical bottlenose dolphins in Canada for the first time, and because last week was Shark Week, I'll throw in our encounter with Itchy Shark. These are the high-level feel-good stories that go something like, hey, look how awesome the deep sea is. Enter pesky, air-breathing, bipedal mammals running around like they own the place. These Homo sapiens do things quickly. They colonize quickly, their populations grow quickly, they discover and extract resources quickly. Likely because they all live and die pretty quickly. In the deep sea, on the other hand, conditions have typically changed over geological timescales, and the associated animals, which can be incredibly long-lived, are adapted to those stable conditions and their own pace and way of life. Therefore, these deep sea animals are expected to be highly vulnerable to any relatively rapid change or direct human impact. Some ocean changes and human impacts are easier to spot than others. Our first story is from our program's first expedition offshore in 2017. Massive swarms of tropical gelatinous pyrosomes, a pelagic tunicate, were turning the top layer of the ocean into noodle soup. I should mention that Canada is not known for its tropical climate. This was an anomalous jelly bloom and the first recorded event of this species' polewards redistribution into Canadian waters. We witnessed firsthand as this surface water shift in the planktonic food web became a deep sea phenomenon, which we published in 2018. Scavengers could take advantage of this opportunistic buffet, such as crabs and sea stars. They were seen gorging themselves, and enemies were displaying the most skill at noodle slurping.
Slurp.
But what of the other animals in this usually food-limited environment? The filter feeders that rely on that slow trickle-down of marine snow from above. The snow that's created out of the more crunchy, fishy surface food web. The answer is we don't know what the cascading effects of this rapid trophic shift were, but it seems perhaps that those weedy scavenger species enjoyed a short-term benefit, while the specialized filter feeders may come up short in the long run. Even more obvious as problematic than a seafloor littered with noodles is our second story, a seafloor littered with lost fishing gear. When bottom contact fishing is done right, when everything goes as planned, the gear goes overboard and it comes back. There's removal of target species, a bunch of bycatch species, and incidental destruction of any vulnerable marine ecosystems down there, such as coldwater corals and sponges. The seamount community and environment is quickly and almost irreversibly altered. But seamount fisheries are infamous for their boom and bust cycles, leaving the significant adverse impacts to potentially recover. The litter, however, remains. On our fished Northeast Pacific seamounts, we've documented an incredible amount of lost fishing gear. This gear can be kilometers long, anchored or drifting and scouring, causing ongoing habitat destruction and ghost fishing. In our 2020 publication documenting the impacts from half a century of fishing on Cobb Seamount, we documented that the majority of lost gear was actively impacting the benthic community. In the most disturbing example, we came across half a dozen fresh carcasses of rockfish entangled in a small piece of lost gill net. The last reported use of gill nets on Cobb Seamount is from 1989, meaning that it is possible that these gill nets have continued to ghost fish and self-bait for somewhere between 30 and 50 years. And because of the preservation qualities of the cold, dark sea and the synthetic material of the gear, it is unknown how many decades or centuries this ghost fishing will continue. If this single occurrence wasn't bad enough, in the most depressing use of math in my career, we estimated the amount of lost fishing gear on a single small conical seamount. As is typical with a deep sea benthic survey, our 13.5 kilometer annotated transects actually only equate to 0.0001% of the seafloor within the fishable depths. Yet we observed 72 pieces of lost fishing gear here. For some extrapolation, we estimate that roughly between 250 and 550,000 pieces of fishing gear is lost on this little seamount. This brings us to our third and final story, a new publication that just came out last week in Global Change Biology. While the Northeast Pacific oxygen minimum zone is a naturally occurring body of low oxygen water, our study resolves rapid changes in the deep water chemistry. We were surprised that these changes are happening so rapidly in the deep. This is a sort of signal you would expect to see communicated closer to the surface. Our study coalesces one of the longest deep sea observational oceanographic time series, reaching all the way back to the 1960s. We pair this with modern visual surveys that characterize almost 2 vertical kilometers of benthic seamount ecosystems. Based on our new and rigorous analysis of the Line P oceanographic monitoring data, the upper 3,000 meters of the Northeast Pacific has lost 15% of its oxygen in the last 60 years. Over that time, the oxygen minimum zone, ranging from about 480 meters to 1,700 meters, has expanded at a rate of 3 meters per year due to deepening at the bottom. Additionally, the carbon saturation horizons tied to ocean acidification have been shoaling at a rate of 1 to 2 meters per year. Based on our visual surveys of 4 Northeast Pacific seamounts, these deep sea features support ecologically important taxa typified by long lifespans, slow growth rates, and limited mobility, including habitat-forming coldwater corals and sponges, echinoderms, and fish. By examining the changing conditions within the narrow realized bathymetric niches of a subset of vulnerable populations, we have resolved significant chemical trends that are rapid in comparison to the lifespan of the taxa and are detrimental to their survival. Some populations are likely already experiencing impacts. To give you one example, we know rough-eye rockfish are extremely long-lived, hypoxia sensitive, and once inhabited deeper waters and more of the seamounts in our study area than we observed during our recent surveys. Over multiple transects in multiple years, we observed rough-eye rockfish are now restricted to only the shallower seamount, inhabiting a small upper fraction of their known range, their lower limit corresponding with the upper boundary of the oxygen minimum zone. Our line of evidence strongly suggests that at least one mass local mortality event has already occurred in our study seamount region, that the low oxygen near the edge of their distribution may have pushed rough-eye rockfish off their seamounts into the inhospitable surrounding open ocean. We arrive at similar endings for all our study taxa. The paper summarizes that within the next century, they will all likely suffer the compounding effects, among other things, of impacts to their distribution, respiration, metabolism, growth, dissolution, feeding behavior, reproduction, and ultimately their survival or local extirpation in our changing oceans. Our 3 stories are all examples of how, over a relatively short amount of time, humans have rapidly started to impact the deep sea. Our studies highlight the importance of mitigating direct human impacts as these animals continue to suffer stressors that are no longer in our immediate control. With climate forcing changes to marine food webs, deep sea fisheries, and expanding oxygen minimum zones occurring throughout the world's oceans, these studies have broad application. This research underlines the work being done by the Canadian government and First Nations to create large marine protected areas to shield the deep sea from seabed mining and harmful fishing practices. The establishment of the MPAs should be a rapid change in the way we treat the deep ocean with positive, long-lasting results. I'm grateful for the opportunity to present our research to you. Thank you to my co-authors and our expedition partners. A special thanks to all the taxonomists out there that make this work possible.